Well, good morning. This is Ian R. Crane. It's the morning of Monday, 22nd of October, 2018. And this is the last full week of October. And I have to say, October has been an absolutely seminal month in so many respects. And it could continue in that vein because over the weekend, Francis Egan and Claire Perry and Greg Clark and Natascha Engel must have been really wrestling with how to proceed here at Preston New Road. Because as far as we can ascertain, it seems that thus far, all Cuadrilla have attempted to do is fire up the pumps to proceed with what's euphemistically termed a mini frack, which is simply to pressurize the well up to the point, so you do it gently, up to the point that the geology actually starts to fracture. And once you've got that information, then you can revisit your calculations and decide whether or not your initial guesstimate in terms of volume and pressure is appropriate to proceed with the first stage of the frack. Well, of course, having triggered that breach point, then it seems that Cuadrilla have very successfully triggered 5 very minor seismic events. But what Francis Egan will know very, very well, if he's been paying attention, is that once they fire up the pumps to run the full frack, the likelihood is that the seismic events are going to be significantly higher than the minor tremors that have been triggered so far. So what to do, Francis? What to do? Because you want to go ahead and frack, but you know very well that once those pumps get fired up, it could be the end of fracking in the UK. Because if this once again triggers seismic events, just like at Priest Hall back in 2011, it's pretty much the end of fracking in this country. So, here's something I never thought I'd say, but call it a hunch. But I think we're on the cusp of ending this industry once and for all. So come on, Francis, fire up those pumps. You know you want to do it, and I know you want to do it. And the reason I want you to do it is so that we can actually end this whole sorry issue once and for all. And all the mug punter investors, unfortunately, of course, many of them will have lost their life savings due to the blag that this time next year they'll be millionaires. But this, sadly, seems to be the only way for common sense to prevail. And it's becoming increasingly evident that there is no common sense or even fundamental human decency about those who are associated with the unconventional gas industry, whether that's at a corporate level or a political level. It just seems to be that it's a case of, well, it's just collateral. And, Francis Egan has taken something in the region of £3 million plus from Cuadrilla since he was appointed to the role of CEO almost 6 years ago. So, he's made out very nicely, and I'm sure that there is a nice little termination bonus waiting for him for giving it his best shot. But, actually, he's probably known all along that the likelihood of success was slim to none. But what the hell? When you've got $500,000 a year dropping into your bank account, and all you got to do is just keep blagging, and until such time as you finally get found out. Well, the other players that are involved, we've talked about Claire Perry, the intellectual pygmy that was put into the Minister of State role by Greg Clark, Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, purely to effectively deflect all the flack. And, she's got no political career ahead of her. She just hasn't got the capability to progress beyond the position that she's already exceeded her abilities to reach, the classic Peter level. Well, Greg Clark, of course, does have ambition. And so what he's hoping is that everybody actually just sort of blames Claire Perry for the disaster as and when it actually occurs. But of course, they've also appointed Natascha Engel, the failed Labour politician of North East Derbyshire, to the role of Shale Gas Commissioner. And she was trotted out on BBC Politics, and I'm grateful to Dave Maris for uploading that clip on Frack Free TV. And basically, Natascha Engel demonstrates that, she is effectively the archetypal failed politician who will then pimp herself out to whatever corporate opportunities arrive, through this sort of revolving door. So shortly after being booted out by the people of North East Derbyshire because of her pro-fracking stance, she was invited to join the board of TWC Consultants. And TWC Associates, as I think they're otherwise known. But, a cursory investigation into TWC, and of course you quickly learn that this is the corporate outlet for Stuart Polak, otherwise known as Lord Stuart Polak, who sits on the board of the Conservative Friends of Israel. But one of his client companies is Elbit Systems, which is an Israeli weapons company that is renowned for the production of the white phosphorus bombs that are dropped from time to time on Gaza, illegally, of course. And, the UN, of course, always votes against such action, but Israel never take any notice of the UN. They haven't done for, 60 odd years now, so I don't think they're likely to start anytime soon. Elbit Systems also produces the outlawed cluster bombs. But, would something like this bother Natascha Engel? Most unlikely. And then, of course, in December, she was invited to come onto the payroll of INEOS, supposedly to produce a booklet explaining fracking and the process, so that the gullible population would go, oh, see, we never had anything to worry about at all. Well, after 6 months, I guess INEOS found out that Natascha's writing skills were not necessarily up to muster, and so it seems that she and INEOS parted company, the terms of which are not apparently in the public domain. So now she is the Shale Gas Commissioner, and I'm sure that at some point we'll find out what the salary of that role is. But Jeremy Corbyn, when he visited the constituency last week, said that he was extremely disappointed that Natascha Engel should take up this role. But he shouldn't be at all surprised, because basically she doesn't really have the intellectual capacity to sort of think beyond getting a salary check into her bank account at the end of the month. How quickly these people pimp themselves out, huh? Anyway, of course, so, big gathering. There was one in London, wasn't there? About 100,000 people? But apparently 17.3 million people, more than were in London at the weekend, actually voted for Brexit. So, what are people going to do? Just keep protesting until they get the result that they want? Well, this is still just about a democracy. And so, whether people like the result or not, the vote was get out. So, let's get on with it and rebuild governance in this country that recognises that government has a responsibility for everybody in this country, not just the global corporatists. But as I've alluded in the past, of course, this is a strategy that has been carefully evolved particularly over the last 50 years. And at the event in London on December 2nd, Democracy in Chains, the speakers that we have at that event will be explaining and providing the evidence to show not only how this agenda has been scripted and show how the events have followed that script, but also show, basically what is going to occur unless we all step up to the plate and actually participate in the process, because the government certainly don't want people to participate in any way, shape or form. The other gathering was at Preston New Road, and varying estimates between 1 and 2,000. The BBC said 1,000, so I'm guessing that 2,000 is probably closer to the truth. So 2,000 odd people gathered there to celebrate the release of the 3 political prisoners, because that's what they were, the 3 young men who were jailed by Justice Robert, euphemistic there, justice being the euphemism, Robert Altham, who sentenced these 3 lads to 15 and 16 months in jail. Of course, that was overturned by the Court of Appeal last week. So the reality is that Francis Egan of Cuadzilla knows that he's under scrutiny like nothing before. And, don't be surprised if Francis Egan does a John Doerr and dips out, whilst he's ahead, if you like, because the moment he instructs his team to fire up those frack pumps, I can pretty much rest assured that it's going to be all over within a very short time after that, as the BGS, British Geological Survey, reports the significant tremors that occur around the horizontal wells that they're starting to frack. Well, interesting times indeed. And, I would encourage people, obviously, to take a look at Natascha Engel's background, take a look at who she's working for, take a look at TWC Associates, take a look at their relationship with Elbit Systems, and, get involved. Let particularly her new bosses, Greg Clark, and Greg Clark in particular, because nobody else in that department really has the capability to take the magnitude of the situation on board. So let Greg Clark know how you feel about this, and we'll see what transpires over the next week or so. Well, meanwhile, tomorrow there won't be any live stream in the morning, because I shall be back in the northeast at Gateshead, where I shall be supporting Mark Steele in yet another attempt by the northeast to gag Mark. This time he faces an alleged criminal charge for threatening behaviour against a couple of Gateshead councillors. And of course the original trial was adjourned when one of the magistrates had to recuse herself because she realised that she knew one of the councillors involved. So this time it will be before a district judge, and actually it's going to be very interesting to see whether the Crown Prosecution Service actually present any evidence or whether they simply withdraw the charges. But if you're anywhere near Gateshead tomorrow, then please come along. There's going to be a gathering at the courts at around about 9:30, and the case will proceed somewhere sort of shortly after about 10 o'clock. And then hopefully after that, Mark can continue to focus on his quest to draw attention to the dangers of 5G microwave frequencies and the LED street lighting. Now, I know this is going to sound a bit outrageous to many people, but in reality, the threat of 5G is at least as great as that of fracking. If fracking did go ahead, which it won't in this country, if fracking did go ahead, then it could take potentially anything from 2 to 10 years for the magnitude of the impact to truly be felt. In Australia, it was 2 years from the start of the exploitation on the Darling Downs before people realise the impact on their water supply. With 5G, the test areas all around the country, if you look at the reports coming out of these areas, there has been an increase in teen suicides and also a massive increase in depression, in insomnia. And people aren't making the links yet, but they will. But they have 2 years before the full rollout of 5G right across the country. And of course, it's going to start in the urban areas. And this week, the Sheffield Greens are apparently meeting to discuss the next stage of their action against the tree felling. Well, let's hope that the Sheffield Greens find it within themselves to actually embrace the full implications of this agenda, because the tree culling is associated directly with the need to site 5G transmitters every 300 meters because of the line of sight frequencies that are involved here. And by the way, Newcastle has recently been identified as having an even bigger tree culling program than Sheffield. But this is going on all around the country. Sheffield is simply the lure, if you like. Keep people focused on what's going on in Sheffield so that they don't actually see what's going on in their immediate locale. But this is going on right across the country. Of course, Network Rail also had recently stated that they have to cull 9.8 million trees from the track side up and down the country. And this is directly associated with the 5G signalling system, the European signalling system that is due to be rolled out again in 2020. So, for all those people who thought, oh my goodness me, once fracking finishes, then, I can get on with my life. Well, if you choose to do that, you can get on with your life for maybe 24 months before the rollout of 5G and then the implications of not doing anything in the previous 2 years starts to hit home. So, my hope is that many people who have had their eyes open through getting involved in the anti-fracking campaign will start to turn their attention to what's occurring with 5G. And this is, of course, what the establishment and the corporations do not want. They do not want people doing their own research. In fact, yesterday morning, I agreed to participate in a very early morning fracking debate on LBC radio. And quite frankly, it was probably the most pathetic fracking debate that has occurred at any time over the previous few years. This was on the Andrew Castle show. And the analyst that was supposedly representing the views of the pro-fracking community actually tried to question whether or not it was appropriate to encourage people to do their own research. He actually tried to interrupt when I was saying that it was really important for people to do their own research, and he actually tried to interrupt by saying, surely you're not going to let him get away with that. People don't need to do their own research. People just need to take it from the experts. Yeah, well, that's exactly what the corporatists and their puppet politicians want. So, obviously, fracking is still very much a focus until such time as Cuadrilla hit those frack pumps and we get the fully expected seismic events which shut this down once and for all. But if you get the opportunity, please do take a look at the issue of 5G, the microwave frequencies, and look at the relationship between the increase in suicides, increase in rates of depression, and in some cases death in areas where 5G has been tested over the past couple of years or so. Well, if I don't see you at Gateshead Law Courts tomorrow morning, then I shall be back with a live stream on Wednesday morning at 8:30. So catch you then. Thanks for joining me this morning.